Chapter 1266. In the meantime, Bojo connected to the internet. First, she used the navigation system to search for news in the country. Fortunately, it was a confidential mission. Hence, the almighty situation wasn't reported. Even the details of the mission were still classified as an S-grade secret. No one knew what had happened. But deep down, Bojo knew that the Almighty's family was different. With his current predicament, his family would definitely receive news. Many people assumed that once Chin Mo received news, he would definitely contact the operation team. They hadn't expected this. The first person to receive Chin Mo's message was Movie Queenin. The call was from Bojo. It was snowing heavily overseas. When Movie Queenin received the call, she was on her way to the airport. Her assistant was worried that she would be cold, so she hurriedly placed a coat over her. Everyone knew that Movie Queenin wasn't in her best condition that day. Hence, she hadn't been filming. They also knew that she had booked a plane ticket to fly back to China. Something seemed to have happened at home. It wasn't an exaggeration to describe Movie Queen Anne's current state. Her assistant had never seen this aristocratic young lady before. When had she ever been so upset? Even her eyes were red. Hello. Bojo could tell that she had been crying. She paused before saying, Auntie, it's me, Joe. Brother Mo is with me now. When Movie Queenin heard this, she stopped abruptly, her eyes bursting with joy. She couldn't help but cover her mouth. That's good, that's good. She couldn't stop saying those 3 words. Her raven black hair slid down her cheeks like silk, blocking her tears. Bojo was a little clumsy in front of an elder. Don't worry, I'll take good care of Brother Mo. I know, Joe, thank you. Movie Queenin controlled her emotions, sniffling. At this moment, she was like a young lady again. I've always been at ease leaving my cold little fellow in your hands. But tell me the truth, is he not in a good condition? A little. Bojo took a moment before deciding to be honest. He lost his memory. Movie Queenin was on the verge of collapsing. But she knew that from the moment her son had decided to carry out this mission. She knew what the consequences would be. Because of this, she hadn't picked up Mr. Chin's calls for many days. She knew the Chin family's burden. But she still felt sorry for her son. When he was young, her son was smarter than her. She even felt that he did not need her company at all. Because the Chin family's education seemed to be like this. But his son was very sensible. No matter how cold his personality was, he did not show any weakness when it came to protecting her. He remembered that he was only 5 years old at that time. She went to a dinner party and someone tried to force her to drink. At that time, Mr. Chin was not there. His small body stood in front of her like a little prince. Sir, my mother doesn't drink. Besides, hasn't anyone taught you how to treat a lady? He spoke in English and didn't make a fuss. With just a pair of eyes, he made a foreigner lose face. But she spent very little time with him. Mr. Chin arranged a lot of classes for him every day. His emotions were getting weaker and weaker, and he didn't even like to talk much. By the time she realized it and wanted to make up for it, it was already too late. Just like 3 years ago, she watched as he carried out a mission. Ever since then, he found it hard to fall asleep. It was as if a part of his heart had died along with that mission. Until Joe appeared. Even though Movie Queenin didn't come into contact with military matters, she knew the reason for her son's departure. Because his mental state was no longer suitable to stay in the military. She had heard everything that Mr. Chin had said in the study room. Her son had been hypnotized. Once it was touched, he would turn into another person. This person would definitely be extremely dangerous and become the most difficult criminal to deal with. Hence, he was no longer suitable to stay in the military. At that time, movie queen Anne's heart had really ached. As a mother, what exactly was wrong with her son? He had risked his life and ended up like this. She had expected this outcome when she went overseas this time. She had been afraid that no one would dare to approach him. Fortunately, Jill was there. Movie queen Anne held onto the escalator and inhaled deeply. But she still couldn't make a sound. In the end, she steadied her breath and said, "Even if you are a boy, Joe, you have to stay by his side because you are the only one he has." That was a mother's request from the bottom of her heart. But Joe's hand paused. She had assumed that movie queen Anne would have found out about her identity. Now that she thought about it, it might have been because of the filming. She had seen movie queen Anne state during filming she wouldn't pick up any calls and would only head back to the Anne family's house. Most of the time, she would go to get her clothes. Besides, the news within the country wouldn't be immediately synchronized with the international news. Besides, she wasn't a big shot. Joe replied guiltily, "Actually, there is something that I have always wanted to tell Auntie Anne. You don't have to tell me, Auntie knows everything." Movie queen Anne smiled and wiped her tears. "Auntie knows that you have always liked each other. Sister, he and I have already discussed it. Once you enter university, the two of you will head to Switzerland to register your marriage. As for the child, you can get a surrogate. If you don't want a surrogate, you can adopt the child." But now, Mo has lost his memory. At the end, movie queen Anne's mood dropped. Joe arched a brow. "You discussed it with my mom." She agreed. Sister, he didn't agree at the start. Movie queen Anne acted like a child and started to take credit. After that, I recommended many movies and novels to her and introduced her to a few successful people in your circle. She started to understand and accept it. To be honest, I couldn't accept it at the start as well. It isn't because you aren't good, it's because this path is too difficult for you. But after some thought, what's so difficult about it? There are many outstanding people overseas like you. My little Ice doesn't seem to dote on you, but I know that only you can make him smile. No one else can. You don't have to worry about the future. Since Mo isn't in politics, I haven't wanted him to stay in the Chin family for a long time. Coincidentally, he will take my surname and you don't have to worry about his father. If he dares to object, I will prepare the divorce papers tomorrow." Adjutant Zhang listened to his wife's words and said quietly, "The chief won't agree." "I don't care if he agrees." Movie queen Anne exuded an elegant beauty even when she was angry. Joe listened. She knew that movie queen Anne was suppressing her anger. She couldn't possibly cause the Almighty's mother to divorce his father. "Auntie Anne, listen to me." Joe coughed lightly. "When I was young, my mother fought for a better life for me so that I wouldn't be bullied by that mistress. I was raised as a boy from a young age, from my actions to the way I dress. In reality, I'm a girl." Movie queen Anne stilled. Her beautiful eyes widened in disbelief. Girl?" Joe braced herself and replied, "Yes. That. It was rare for movie queen Anne to be at a loss. "My little Ice," Joe coughed again. "Brother Mo already knew." "You said he already knew." Movie queen Anne's beautiful eyes widened. "He never told me about it. He even hinted that your relationship would be difficult. He said that if I liked you, I should settle down with you as soon as possible. That way, I wouldn't have to ask Sister he for your hand in marriage when you found a girlfriend. This kid is really," even though he was her biological son, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But the only person who could make her son so childish, to the point of resorting to such underhanded methods, was this kid. "No, I was planning to let both of you wear suits on your wedding day, hence, I sent the measurements over. Now, I'm going to change it into a wedding gown, yes, change it into a wedding gown." I'll contact Robert later. Joe, what kind of wedding gown do you like? Is it Chinese or Western? Bojo hadn't expected the topic to develop in this direction. However, she had never been a shy person. Anything is fine, once Brother Mo and I return and after the Asian Cup, we'll get married. Movie Queen and smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. All right. She was clear that no one would marry a dangerous person who had lost her memory without hesitation. Except for Joe. Perhaps she understood why her little ice was so fixated on Joe. She had never been liked like this before. Anyone would have softened their heart. They would never accept another person. But the fact that Joe was a girl made Movie Queen and overjoyed, her face filled with excitement. She didn't want to return to the country and immediately called the designer. Deputy Zhang was still thinking about how to explain to his boss. On the other hand, it wasn't easy to find an inn in the MT area since it was such a place. Fortunately, Bojo was lucky and she could speak the local language, so she managed to find a small inn. But there weren't any good accommodations here. There definitely weren't any double standards, the hot water wasn't too hot and the bed was extremely narrow, but it was enough for 2 people. Other than a wooden chair, there weren't any other facilities in the room. Chi Nemo woke up in the middle, turning his head to look, his arm resting on someone's shoulder. She continued, you probably haven't stayed in such a place before, but it's good that the bed is small, you can hug it to sleep. Her intentions were too obvious, she was still acting like a sugar daddy. How could there be such a sugar daddy in this world? Even Chin Mo didn't notice the smile on his face. Then he shut his eyes, his entire body turning cold. It was probably because of the nap in the car, his stamina was starting to recover. Bojo watched the person sitting on the chair, heading down to get a pot of hot water before pouring it into a cup, using a cotton swab to moisten Chin Mo's lips. Chin Mo knew what she was doing, but he didn't know how far she would go. She didn't even touch his lips 3 times. Her voice rang in his ears again. It's too troublesome, we've already kissed many times. Chin Mo listened without a change in expression. Before he could react, a softness was imprinted on his lips. It was still as fragrant as ever, even the water that entered his mouth was slightly sweet. Chin Mo frowned, but in the end, he didn't push the person who was obviously taking advantage of him away. Isn't one mouthful too little? Bojo bent her back, her expression serious. Then she lowered her head. Just like that, Chin Mo was kissed 3 times. On the 4th time, Bojo realized a problem, deciding to remove his pants as well. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get on the bed. But she leaned over, the moment she moved her belt, her eyes opened slowly. That pair of closed eyes slowly opened. They were very deep, and even his voice was a little hoarse. What do you want to do to me? MH? Before Bojo could reply, Chin Mo flipped his hand. Chin Mo flipped his hand and pinned her onto the floor with his bare upper body. His breath was hot. Your clothes are wetter than mine. Do you want me to help you take them off? Chin Mo's left hand had already reached into her shirt, touching the skin that made him comfortable. His thin lips lifted slightly. You can take the chance to tell me how we interacted in the past. She wasn't sure if it was because of his hot breath or Chin Mo's actions, but her body started to heat up. Color finally returned to her lips. Bojo felt that this was a good opportunity. She glanced up. You used to listen to me. Is that so? Chin Mo didn't stop, arching a brow. If I ask you to go east, you definitely wouldn't go west. You liked me a lot and thought of many ways to confess to me. Oh. Chin Mo paused, seemingly pondering over her words. Bojo reached out and hugged his neck, a smile on her face. Look at my face, Brother Mo, you should know that there are many people chasing after me. That's why you often feel threatened and jealous. Do you think I've lost my mind after losing my memory, or is it because of the fever? Chin Mo lifted her chin slowly. Do you think I'll do what you just said? Bojo didn't seem embarrassed at all. Yes. Chin Mo looked at the girl who was asking for a yard after being given an inch. Suddenly, he placed the tip of her red ear between his lips and said evilly, if it's really like what you said, then I'm very proactive in bed. At this moment, Bojo realized where his hand was. Her body kept feeling hot. The current almighty was really hard to deal with in certain aspects. The moment Bojo thought about it, she felt as though someone had bitten her neck. So, my sugar daddy, how do you like me to serve you? Chin Mo smiled, leaning forward to kiss the place he had bitten, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Chapter 1267. Her head started to spin and even her breathing was hot. She wasn't sure if it was because of the hypnosis. The Almighty's most unscrupulous side burst forth. Even the way he kissed had changed a lot. It was evil and cold. Indeed, it was unstoppable. The numbness from her neck didn't allow her time to think. The slight itch was accompanied by a slight pain. It felt as though she was being embraced by a vampire. It was written in a book. The moment he kissed my neck, everything seemed to disappear. Only that wonderful comfort was left, making her drown in it. She could smell the scent on his body, the sweetness that made her sink deeper. You will never forget the scenery you saw at that time. It was like a falling meteor, her entire body yearning for more. Bojo reached out and hugged Chin Mo. Her slender neck stretched out, like a pure maiden sacrificing herself to the devil. Chin Mo's gaze darkened, his thin lips inching closer. Just as he was about to take another step, he realized that her face was unusually red. Her body temperature was higher than his. And why was there a wound on her hand? It seemed to have been cut by a metal wire, and there was even blood. Had it been when she had gotten out of the car to look for oil? She was indeed an idiot. They had already reached this stage. She had actually driven all the way. Chin Mo couldn't describe his feelings. His pupils constricted slightly. There seemed to be something slowly overflowing from his chest. It was a little stuffy but not completely stuffy. But it was very hot, as though it was coming from inside her body. Especially when her breathing was so close to him, including her heartbeat that wouldn't lie. All these things added together made it hard for him to continue his original actions. He wanted to play with her fiercely before leaving. After all, he didn't believe a single word that came out of her mouth. For example, her sugar daddy. Chin Mo's fingers brushed past her face, his voice low. Get up. MH. Bojo's head was still heavy, she couldn't understand what he was saying. Was he angry? Why was there a smile on his lips but there wasn't any warmth in his eyes? Chin Mo looked at her, bent down, and carried her horizontally. He strode into the bathroom and tore off her top in a few moves. It was too sudden, Bojo couldn't block in time. Under the light, it was an alluring expanse of snow white. Whether it was the collarbone or the shoulders, it was a symbol of a young girl's height. They were so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off them. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed slightly when he saw this scene. Even his fingers paused for a moment. He seemed to be enduring something. Swoosh. He pulled out a towel and wrapped her up. However, that person was still smiling. Brother Mo, what's wrong? Chin Mo tilted his head and pinched her chin. Don't you know you have a fever? Bojo paused, her expression a little dazed. Indeed, she hadn't noticed that her body temperature had risen. She muttered to herself, no wonder I started to feel dizzy. When Chin Mo heard her words, he didn't know why, but he suddenly couldn't maintain his current face. He had originally planned to use this appearance to get closer to her and achieve his goal. Chapter 1268. She was only concerned about the other person and didn't care about herself at all. Chi Nemo didn't like her behavior, and even more so, he didn't like her affecting his emotions. Bojo glanced at him, suddenly understanding his actions. She reached out and hugged his waist, smiling faintly. "Brother Mo, you're concerned about me." Chin Mo's gaze froze. He couldn't turn his head away and scoffed. He pinched her hair between his fingers and said flirtatiously, "Aren't you my sugar daddy? Of course I have to care. Otherwise, who would give me money to spend? You seem rather familiar with your position." Bojo coughed as she spoke, the smile on her face never fading. Chin Mo frowned. "What's wrong with your body? It wouldn't be like this if it was just a fever." "Asthma." Bojo was indeed having trouble breathing. Chin Mo watched her, an inexplicable sense of irritation in his chest. Regardless of his motive for being by her side, he didn't like to see his plaything in such a state. "You can't breathe." "A little." It wasn't too serious. Bojo was aware of her body condition. Chin Mo held onto her waist, lifting her upwards. "Let's change the way you breathe." Before Bojo could finish her sentence, he lowered his head and kissed her. The minty breath seemed to be able to lower her body temperature. The air in her mouth was so fresh it made her yearn for it. Kissing was an addictive thing. Especially when it was with the Almighty. Her breathing wasn't unbearable anymore. Just a little more and he would kiss her again, his fingers caressing her ears. Gently, as though he was treating a pet. Her heart was beating erratically. That seemed to be the most beautiful part. When the kiss ended, he pressed his forehead against hers, his breathing unstable, his gaze deep. "It's sweet and satisfying." What did he mean by sweet and satisfying? In the past, the Almighty would never say that. Bojo's face heated up, the discomfort from her illness alleviated. But at this moment, she realized she was completely naked. Even though she was wrapped in a fur-colored bath towel, it was just a thin layer. It wasn't useful at all. The Almighty's chest was right in front of her. The lines were clear, as if they had been carved out. When he stood up, the mermaid lines were even more obvious. But his hands just hugged her, his fingers caressing her softness, and his eyes were filled with vampire-like wickedness. Yes, and very smooth. The numbness brought about by the skin contact made her legs lose some of their original strength. In the past, Bojo had never known that getting close to someone like this would be unbearable. But now that she was in his arms, just by looking at her, her heart would beat very fast, and every movement would cause a wave of numbness. Because this was none other than her pet. "You used to call me an idiot when we were young." Chin Mo arched a brow. "Oh." Bojo replied, "At that time, I really wanted to buy you. I even smashed the piggy bank that I had saved for a long time just to get my hands on you. I even asked you how much a kilo was worth." Chin Mo smirked. "Are you an idiot? Do you think people are sold by weight?" When Bojo heard this, she paused, breaking into a smile. The exquisite little boy in her memory frowned like a prince. "Little Bojo, are you an idiot? Do you think people are sold by weight?" It was the same, even if she had lost her memory. Chapter 1269. With that, Chin Mo's kiss landed on her neck again. Every kiss was slightly cold. Even after his body temperature had recovered, his skin was like a porcelain jade that melted in the touch. He pressed against her body without any distance, but he didn't take another step forward. The darkness in his eyes made him look more mischievous. "Shall we sweat in another way?" Bojo looked into his eyes, her consciousness fading. Her eyelashes trembled and the air she exhaled became hotter. Chin Mo's gaze deepened as he carried her. Wherever his fingers brushed past, Bojo couldn't help arching her back. It was as he had said, just a sweat. Hence, he didn't take any further actions. After making her blush, he would only chuckle in her ear and lick her lips lightly. Gradually, drowsiness overtook her. Bojo tilted her head and closed her eyes slowly. Chinemo looked at the person who had fallen asleep in his arms, his gaze deepening. Forget it. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. It didn't matter where he went. He could leave when he was no longer interested. My sugar daddy, how long will you keep me interested? Chinemo laughed, his fingers still playing with the youngster's black hair, his lips curving into a devilish smile. She wasn't without merits. At least this guy smelled good. The feeling in his arms was good too, her entire body was warm. It was completely different from the coldness on his body. Chinemo raised a brow, placing his chin on the youngster's head. He held her with one hand and observed her in his arms. She was so sick that she shouldn't be aggressive anymore. But Chinemo knew that this wasn't her original self. Because no one would dare to confront more than 10 speedboats like that. She lit a lighter and blew things up as she pleased. Even her posture looked good. It was rare to see such a well-behaved person. Indeed, at this moment, Bojo was very well-behaved. She looked like a little prince when she was quiet. Even her pure black hair hung down, covering her ears and eyes. Only the porcelain white curve of her chin could be seen. Chinemo looked at her for a moment, tilting his head and kissing the top of her head. After this action, Chinemo froze. Then he frowned, a faint coldness in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. The night sky outside the window gradually surged. Because it had never been polluted, the starry sky outside was very beautiful. It's easy to fall asleep. Especially when he was carrying someone in his arms. He didn't feel cold. In the latter half of the night, the temperature of the person in his arms increased. It was so high that Chinemo, who had fallen asleep, suddenly opened his eyes. Without any unnecessary movements, his first reaction was to place his hand on her forehead. When he felt the scalding heat, he turned to look at Bojo. His eyes darkened even more. He got up from the bed and walked out of the room half naked without even putting on a jacket. The sky is dark now. The boss was a local, and he was drinking downstairs. He probably had an appointment with a few of his friends, so he hadn't left yet. Chinemo didn't stop and walked over. Do you have alcohol here? The boss glanced at Chinemo but didn't reply. He continued to drink his wine, talking and laughing. Just as he was about to lean forward and put a peanut in his mouth, there was a swoosh sound. A poker card stabbed into the back of his hand. Blood flowed out instantly. Even though it wasn't a lot, the boss's entire face changed from the pain. The person sitting opposite him stood up abruptly, probably wanting to hit Chinemo's head. But the moment he raised the bottle, his wrist was grabbed. It was just a little force. Bang! He fell straight onto the ground. The expressions of the three people changed. Especially the boss, he looked at his hand, his gaze wavering. Chinemo held onto the handle of the chair, his lips curling up slightly. His voice rang beside the boss's ear like an elegant devil. Do you have alcohol here? Yes, yes, yes. The boss held onto his hand. I'll get it for you now. Chinemo smiled in satisfaction. Thank you. The boss trembled when he heard the two words. This man was really scary. Originally, the boss didn't take them seriously because they weren't locals. But now, he didn't dare to neglect them anymore. This devil-like man didn't look like the weak and frail person he had when he was leaning on the youngster. Even though he was smiling, it sent chills down one's spine. They subconsciously obeyed his orders. Besides the alcohol, Mo also brought a basin of hot water upstairs. Before he left, he said, "There's someone up there who's sick. He needs to rest and recuperate, so it's better not to make any unnecessary movements." The boss was startled. He hurriedly replied, "Yes." The pain on the back of his hand made him lose all his temper. The only person who wasn't injured came over. Who exactly is that person? He looks rather refined. How could he injure someone with poker cards? How would I know? If he knew, would he dare to be so reckless? Mo brought the basin of hot water into the room. The door was locked with a long leg. Indeed, even with his upper body bare, Mo was different from others. The nobility around him didn't dissipate. But because of the difference in his eyes, there was a hint of darkness mixed in. He glanced at Bojo, who was lying on the bed. He took a towel, dipped it in the hot water, and placed it on her fair forehead. The thermometers here weren't clean. Even if the boss had one, Mo didn't take it. For some reason, he had taken a candy from the snack counter at the front desk. At that time, he had been bored waiting for the hot water and had played with it in his hands. Now, he opened the packaging and used the end of the candy to touch the youngster's lips. Mo didn't see any reaction from her. He leaned over and used his lips to pry open her lips. Then he pulled away, allowing her to bite the candy in his hands. She probably tasted the sweetness in her mouth. The youngster's thin lips moved. Her brows weren't frowning as badly as before. Mo realized that he didn't like her unhappy expression. Since he had found a toy, the more exquisite it was, the better. Mo reached out and took her hand. He dipped a cotton swab in alcohol and smeared it inch by inch on her joints. It wasn't just her hands, but her knees, her collarbone, her lower abdomen. Bojo, whose entire body was burning uncomfortably, couldn't sleep well. When she felt the comforting coolness, she couldn't help opening her eyes. The first thing she saw was the handsome and fair side profile under the light. His head was lowered, and she was the only one in his eyes. Coincidentally, it brushed against her long legs. It would have been better if she hadn't woken up. Once she woke up, all her senses returned. Waves of numbness and that pair of deep eyes. Her body seemed to have turned into a pool of water, scattering softly on the ground. Even her eyes were wet. Mo looked at the youngster's flushed face and watery eyes. His hand paused. Maintaining that position, he leaned forward and planted a kiss on her collarbone. It was obviously different from before. His fingers were still in their original position. He slid down. The softness in his hand and the warmth of the jade on his body made his breathing unstable. But he still held it in. Even though it was a strange way of holding it in. But as a criminal psychologist, how could he lay his hands on his own toy? Since it was a toy, he could play with it or abandon it, but he couldn't do it to the end. Mo paused at the last moment. He watched her glowing mole and smiled slowly. "My sugar daddy, you really can captivate me if you aren't careful." Bojo realized that he wasn't really willing to touch her. But her body was too cold and so was her consciousness. As she floated up and down, she closed her eyes again. After some time, she seemed to be pulled into someone's embrace. He could vaguely hear a voice ringing in his ears. It sounded a little arrogant. "It's already like this, why hasn't the temperature dropped? My sugar daddy, you better get better. This is the first time I've served someone like this." Bojo wanted to laugh when she heard that. Who would force someone to lower their fever? Besides, the Almighty, you're actually talking about me, right? For some reason, Bojo felt that the Almighty's tone was extremely similar to when they were young. It was probably because it was too comfortable to be hugged. At 3 in the morning, Bojo felt her back breaking out in sweat. Her long legs rubbed against the wall, but she didn't move. He pressed her down. "What's wrong?" "Hot." Bojo wanted to pull the blanket away when she said this. Chinemo wrapped her up, preventing her from moving. He only said one word. "Sleep." But it was still hot. Bojo could only think of a way to absorb the coldness from his body. Chinemo glanced at the person whose face was pressed against his chest. His eyes darkened and his fingers tightened. The entire night passed like this. When she finally quietened down, the hair on her forehead was drenched in sweat and stuck to her face. Chinemo raised a brow. He felt the temperature on her forehead again. It wasn't as hot as before. Very good. He didn't want his toy to look so sickly. At around 4:30 p.m., Bojo was in a deep sleep. When she woke up, the sky was already bright. The sunlight shone through the window, splashing onto her face. When she turned her head, she saw the most intoxicating sleeping face in the world. Every time the Almighty fell asleep, he would remind her of the word holy. Be it when she was young or when she grew up. Bojo's gaze moved downwards. She saw the hand that was wrapped around her waist. The bed was indeed narrow. The two of them had to lie on their sides to sleep. It was also because of this that they were so close to each other that his breath could follow his movements and hit her ear. Then, something caught her attention. The one hanging around his neck seemed to be from that time. The moment Bojo reached out, he held on to her wrist. He flipped over, his breath falling. His gaze was heavy and his voice was seductive and hoarse. "It seems like my sugar daddy doesn't know that the man in the morning can't be provoked." The next moment, Bojo felt the kiss landing on her shoulder. It was dense, with a slight bite. It made her heart beat faster. Even her mind was blank. The temperature in the room continued to rise, until there was water on her body. That was when Bojo realized that he had carried her to the bathroom. He was still kissing her. He seemed to like her reaction. His thin lips were lifted. He allowed her to lean on him after she lost all her strength. Other than kissing, they didn't do anything else. But the numbness from his fingers made Bojo tremble slightly. But she didn't understand why he stopped. Especially after he held onto her waist forcefully, he bit her shoulder. Then, his breath faded and he pulled the towel over. "Did we get along like this in the past?" His black hair was still dripping. Drop by drop, it landed on her collarbone. Bojo was wrapped in the towel. She waited for the heat to dissipate. Chinemo smiled, but his expression couldn't be seen. "Is that so?" Bojo felt that the Almighty shouldn't have such a reaction. Just as she was about to speak, he glanced up, a devilish glint in his eyes. "So my sugar daddy likes this type. It's a pity your body doesn't allow it, otherwise." Chinemo leaned forward, his teeth biting her ear. His breath was still hot, but there wasn't a hint of warmth in his eyes. "You can do anything." Bojo remained silent. That was because there was a clear knock on the door. The soundproofing in such a place wasn't good. Even with two doors separating them, the sound could still be heard. It was the boss. "Breakfast is ready. If the two guests are awake, please come to the door to get it." Bojo arched a brow. Breakfast is provided in such a place. It wasn't her first time staying in such an inn. It was good enough that there was hot water. Why was there breakfast now? And the boss was here to deliver it. The naive Joe wouldn't have guessed that the boss had been frightened by the Almighty last night. Breakfast aside, the Manchu Han Imperial feast would probably be brought over. "I'll go get it." Swoosh. Chinemo opened the bathroom door, tossing two sets of clothes in before putting on a pair of black trousers. He looked especially handsome when he did all of this. clean and cold. Compared to the Chin Mo of the past, he was indeed different. The moment he opened the door, the boss froze. The owner outside the door suddenly stiffened, and the hand holding the wooden plate trembled. The boss admitted that he had never seen such a handsome man, especially when his black hair was dripping with water. But that was why he resembled the devil in the comics. Especially his gaze, it was so cold it sent chills down her spine. The man seemed to be in a bad mood. It couldn't be. Could it be that he was stabbed again like last night? You can leave now. When there weren't any toys around, Chin Mo didn't care about his murderous aura. The boss trembled. Without another word, he passed the tray to the man and fled the scene. Now, he couldn't help but admire the youngster who had helped the man into the inn last night. Speaking of which, it was that young man who had given him the illusion that his friend's body was extremely weak and that he would feel pain if anything bumped into him. That was why the boss had thought that he was a noble vase. How was he a vase? He was clearly a devil. Chapter 1270. The breakfast was surprisingly sumptuous. The bread, fruits, and milk were all fresh. Bojo held on to the milk, watching the Almighty sitting in front of her. The conditions here didn't allow for a European-style dining table. It was just that the sunlight was too good. Even though one of them was standing and the other was sitting, the corners of their mouths were filled with sweetness as they ate. It was a simple life. It was probably because no one knew them here. Hence, there wasn't a need to disguise. It was the most natural state. Chin Mo leaned against the wall with his upper body bare. He stood casually, but because of his long legs, he looked extremely handsome. Coupled with his noble aura, it was a pleasure to look at him. Just looking at it was a pleasure. He tore open the bread, dipped it in jam, and fed it to a certain someone. A certain someone found it delicious. That was when he tried it. Bojo didn't seem to realize that she had become the Almighty's lab rat. She ate the bread in big mouthfuls, her cheeks puffed up. Eating was the happiest thing in the world. Chin Mo realized that no matter what this fellow fed her, she would find it delicious. Even Chin Mo didn't notice the smile on his face. Chin Mo, who had an average appetite, ate quite a bit. He found one of the benefits of this toy: it was easy to eat. With this eating method, the two of them finished their breakfast in 2 to 3 bites. After she finished the milk, she casually picked up the hairdryer and reached out to press down on the Almighty, who was about to stand up. Chin Mo arched a brow. Before he could say anything, he felt the hot air above his head. In addition, the youngster's fingers were fiddling with his hair. He didn't need to think to know what she was doing. He leaned against the wall, his line of sight able to see the loose sweater she was wearing. The fresh scent of a shower was even more obvious with the blowing of the hairdryer. He wasn't sure if it was because the sunlight was too good or because the strength was too moderate. When she moved her wrist, Chin Mo didn't push her away. A glint flashed past his eyes. Bojo wore a mischievous expression. It wasn't easy to see the Almighty being so obedient. Chin Mo wasn't suited for someone to rub his hair. He frowned, tilting his handsome face away. "Don't hide." Bojo pressed it back down and smiled. "You used to love me drying your hair. You would run over every time you washed your hair." Hearing this, Chin Mo's eyes darkened. He wasn't happy, but he didn't show any signs of anger. However, he didn't like to hear her talk about the past. That would make him feel like he had no sense of existence now. Next, Chin Mo moved. He reached out and pulled her hand over, planting a kiss on her fingertips. Just like that, they seemed to be touching. His entire body was bewitching. My sugar daddy is really capable. With that, Chin Mo stood up, grabbed the blowtorch, and threw it into the bathroom. Chapter 1271. Bojo noticed the change in the Almighty's attitude. From his resistance to the mention of it, there had never been any warmth in his gaze. But she didn't expose him. As long as the Almighty wanted to return to Jiang City, it didn't matter what his real motive was. There were less than 3 days left until the Asian Cup. She had checked the rules of the competition and the opponents she would encounter. Supreme Alliance needed the Almighty. It hadn't been easy for them to reach this stage. If they missed the championship again because they didn't leave on time, everyone would regret it for the rest of their lives. Compared to the new teams, Supreme Alliance wasn't young anymore. In the esports arena, there was never a lack of talented and young players. Most people wouldn't just say they liked a team, but they didn't really like one team. Great waves washing sand was the basic principle of this industry. Bojo wasn't the only one who understood this. Yunhu, Lin Feng, Rao Rong, these players who had been playing for a few years all understood. Especially Yin Weiyao. Even though he said that his age wasn't stable. But deep down, he knew that this wasn't his peak. After this battle, whether or not they could wait another year and continue on this path was unknown to everyone. They couldn't compare to the new teams. Those youngsters were still young and had unlimited possibilities. Hence, Bojo tried her best to bring the Almighty back to Jiang City. She knew that was what he wanted. Even if he had forgotten about it. Actually, it didn't matter. She was helping him remember it. Compared to the ungoverned area, the bustling Jiang City had already started to advertise for the upcoming Asian Cup. Regardless of whether it was online or offline, anyone who played games knew that this year's Asian Cup would be held in Jiang City. The lights in the Qin Group's club were lit throughout the night. Yao Yao seemed to be living in the internet cafe. There was basically someone delivering food in the internet cafe. A set meal of rice with meat and vegetables for 10 yuan. There were many varieties such as shredded pork with chili sauce, shredded pork with garlic sauce, and stir-fry. At noon, there weren't many people. In the evening, almost all the people who came to stay overnight would order a serving at around 12 o'clock. In the past, Shui Yao Yao had never eaten dinner because she was on a diet. Now, to familiarize herself with the battlefield, she would play games twice as often as before. When they were hungry, they would ask the people in the internet cafe for a portion. Now, Shui Yao Yao had gained some fame. She also had fans on the internet. Yin Weiyao had specially prepared a hat for her. Feng Shang was sitting next to her, wearing the same baseball cap. Coco also wanted to come over for a free meal. Facing the mirror, he began to arm himself. After she was armed, she crept downstairs and silently walked past a dozen female fans waiting downstairs. She smiled so much that her eyes were curved. She took out her phone and sent a voice message to Yin Weiyao. "Uncle, I'm telling you, I was very successful this time. No one recognized me. Wait for me, I'll be there in a while." Yin Weiyao had a cigarette in his mouth. After listening to the voice message, he lifted his head slightly and didn't reply. No matter how Coco armed himself, he would be recognized. Unfortunately, Coco wasn't aware of this problem. He was very excited and looked like a cat-like teenager. Even his eyes were covered, but he had a pair of furry ears on his head. After all, Christmas was coming. As a typical otaku, Coco was very curious about everything. He had used 20 minutes to shake off his assistant. He had even used the excuse of a cold to trick him into buying medicine for him so that he could go to the internet cafe at night. Coco rarely went out alone. He was a young master from abroad and he was an esports celebrity that Supreme Alliance had specially groomed. Hence, his trips were destined to be different from others. Every time he went out, he would be followed by a nanny car. This wasn't an exaggeration. His fans were young but they were very loyal. They would often wait downstairs and sometimes at the airport, although it wasn't on a large scale. But it was undeniable that it wasn't easy for Coco to go out. This time, Coco thought that he had finally shaken off his assistant and wanted to try taking the subway alone. He didn't know that his sneaky behavior had been captured by the people behind him. There were 3 girls covering their mouths and whispering, "Coco is so cute." He thought we couldn't tell who he was. He's so cute. Since someone had taken a photo, someone would definitely post it online. When Coco bought the subway card with his mask on, his eyes were very serious as he asked the ticket seller, "Do you know me?" Then, he successfully got a subtle look from the ticket seller, asking him if he had some kind of mental illness. Coco wasn't angry. Instead, he was very satisfied. Look, everything was fine. He could go out by himself. However, the next second, his phone rang. His phone rang. It was Feng Yi. Coco was shocked. He looked around before picking up the call, pretending to be calm. "Hello, what's up?" "I'm playing games to train my hand speed. If there's nothing important, I'll hang up first." "Playing games? Training your hand speed?" Feng Yi laughed. "Why don't you explain to me how you train your hand speed by playing games in the subway?" Coco froze. He told himself that Fox Phone couldn't possibly know where he was. He must be trying to bomb him. "Cough, what are you saying?" "I can't hear you. The game is dying." Feng Yi heard this and placed his pen down slowly. He looked at the tablet that the assistant brought over. The photo on it was very eye-catching. "The cat ears on your head look good. F***ck. Coco took off his mask and was a little annoyed. "How did you know?" Feng Yi gestured to the assistant before saying, "It's all thanks to your huge number of fans. There should be a few behind you now and there will be more in the future. It's best that you leave before anyone can react. As for the place you want to go to, do you want to cause the internet cafe to close down? Stay where you are and don't move. The assistant will be there in a minute." Coco actually didn't understand. "Fox Phone, be honest, are you hiding something from us?" Otherwise, even in the past, he would occasionally come out for a breather. It wouldn't affect the overall situation. Feng Yi paused. "No." Coco wore his mask. "Who are you lying to? It's not like I don't go online. Those people are still scolding Little Spade, that's why you're worried about others." Feng Yi laughed. "Since you're clear, come back obediently." "Got it." Coco tilted his head, his eyes dimming. But, is it always going to be like this? Sometimes, he didn't understand the speculations the netizens had towards that person. Just because that person was a girl, all her previous efforts were denied. If it hadn't been for Big Spade, they wouldn't have been able to qualify and would have lost in the provincial team competition. How could they have a future? Big Spade had never done anything overboard. If she had really found a substitute player or done something immoral, he wouldn't forgive her. Because it was related to professionalism. But so what? Coco still believed that fans shouldn't be like this. But he knew that some people had used their love as an excuse to force Feng Yi to spare some time to manage. Some people's love was scarier than disgust. They used that word to blackmail you into thanking her. If you didn't thank them, they would think you didn't cherish your true fans. The comments online didn't die down. Sometimes, Coco's heart would turn cold. He had asked himself why he still wanted to play esports. There were thousands of reasons to tell him to give up. But there was one reason he couldn't let it go. His teammates were here. There were so many people holding up signs, supporting him. This was probably the question that every Supreme Alliance member would be thinking about in the middle of the night. But they didn't know. The matter online was one thing. What truly made Feng Yi feel helpless was that he had used his family's connections to obtain accurate information from the compound. Qin Mo was missing. And the higher-ups were trying to find him. There wasn't any specific content and the person who said it wasn't clear. Because anything related to Qin Mo was too confidential. Feng Yi put down the phone in his hand. How was he going to tell the players who were still waiting for Qin Mo's return that their captain wouldn't be coming back, Boss Feng? The assistant watched the vice president's expression worriedly. She had been in the club for so long but had never seen Feng Yi like this. Regardless of the time, he would never let people think Supreme Alliance was in danger. Even after the competition ended, he still had a fox-like smile on his face, moving freely in and out of the mall. But this time, he took off his glasses, probably because he was too tired, even his voice was a little hoarse. Go and write the press release. Are we really going to do that? The assistant couldn't help but ask. Is there a possibility of a turnaround? Feng Yi glanced over, rubbing his brows, not saying a word. The assistant continued, actually, Boss Feng, I used to resent Big Spade too. After all, I couldn't understand why she wasn't afraid of anything, not even her fans. What right did she have to be like that? Later on, I understood that she didn't do anything wrong. Esports is just esports. If it wasn't for her, Supreme Alliance would forever be stuck in the provincial competition. It's us outsiders who think too much. If we like an idol, we should let that idol do as we want. This is a problem in itself. Feng Yi tilted his head, lighting a cigarette. It's too late. After going through that kind of thing, no one would come back. Many people said that the fans would be bitterly disappointed. Perhaps they didn't know. As an idol, they would be bitterly disappointed. But at this moment, a video suddenly appeared on Weibo. The media was shocked at the number of reposts. How could it be so high? It was about to become a hot topic. Feng Yi was still thinking about how to get Coco out of the whirlpool of public opinion without being used by others. He didn't notice the commotion on the internet. It was someone from the publicity department. He pushed open the meeting room door, panting heavily as he looked at Feng Yi. Boss Feng, Weibo, Weibo. Feng Yi's face changed, thinking that something had happened on Weibo. Everyone knew that Supreme Alliance was on the verge of collapse. Ever since the news of Spade Z being a girl was exposed, the internet hadn't calmed down. If it happened again. Even Feng Yi wasn't sure if they would lose the Asian Cup before the competition even started. Boss Feng, here. The person in charge of the operations took a laptop, clicking on one of the Weibo posts. The post was written like this. Do you still remember the brothers who used to play together in the dormitory? Do you still remember the crystal that you pushed away together? Do you still remember the days when you turned around and clapped with that person, shouting, double kill, instant noodles flying everywhere? Do you still remember the team that you loved the most, Supreme Alliance? After the two words Supreme Alliance landed. It was a video. The video was like a micro-movie, but it was as though it was happening right beside them. The first scene of the video was of a teacher, teaching ABCD on the stage. The second scene was of a computer programmer. The camera slid over to the hero icon on his computer screen. He was working overtime late at night, staring at the icon for a long time without opening it. The third scene was of a driver, his body leaning back, waiting for the traffic light. He heard a middle school student beside him talking. Did you know that this year's Asian Cup will be held in Jiang City? Supreme Alliance will be competing. The driver's fingers paused, only starting the car after 3 seconds. The fourth scene was of a person working on a video, but he couldn't do it well. He was obviously being scolded, turning his head to smoke. Brotherly, buy me a bottle of water. Someone ordered him. He didn't move. The person saw him looking at his computer, arching a brow. Brotherly, do you know how to play games? Nope. However, the next moment, he lifted his head to see a video. Almost at the same time, the other three were watching the video from different places. It was a video of Supreme Alliance competing in the National League. 11 of them, lined up, their uniforms fluttering in the wind. When you dream in the middle of the night, do you still remember the path you took when you were young, the people you loved, the games you played? In 2018, we will wait for you here, Supreme Alliance. In that instant, the gazes of the four of them changed. The scene returned to a year ago, when they were sitting in the dormitory, each of them wearing headphones, throwing peanuts at each other. Buses, high-speed trains, taxis. The background music started. It was the song Spade Z had hummed during the filming of the variety show. You and I come from small villages in Hubei, Sichuan, Guangxi, Ningxia, Hunan, Shandong, Guizhou, and Yunnan. We once swore to be great people, but one day in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, we suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, as though we were woken up by fate. It said that we can't live like this. It said that we can't live like this for the rest of our lives. Swoosh. The scene changed. The four of them gathered in Jiang City. After hugging, they sat in the internet cafe, just like in school. They wore their headphones and the special effects of burning blood started playing. We're here, the real Supreme Alliance, where are you? The real Supreme Alliance. Feng Yi paused. Even the people from the publicity department had tears in their eyes as they watched from behind. Without Spade Z, how could the Supreme Alliance be considered the real Supreme Alliance? What shocked them was that the video wasn't over. It was followed by a 5-second interview. I'm from Jiangxi, Big Spade, where are you? Reporting from Shandong, I'm here to watch the competition. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, Supreme Alliance is complete with Almighty Z. I'm in Hangzhou. The first time I heard about Spade Z, I found her extremely handsome. The FC King of Zone C, she doesn't say a word when she's playing, she's so cool. As long as we follow behind her, we can win. Is it time? It's a pity, Almighty Z, I miss you so much. Almighty Z, I miss you so much. It was just a few words, but they came from all over the world. Yes, it wasn't just China. There were people of other colors too. Every time a city's name flashed across the video, it was a shocking sight. In the end, there was only one sentence. Supreme Alliance, we'll be waiting for your return. The operations manager was a lady after all, she couldn't help but cry. Feng Yi stood there, dressed in a well-ironed suit. When he turned back, he saw the names of the team members. One after another, the names were filled, leaving only the assassin spot. Feng Yi inhaled deeply. Contact the committee and report Spade Z's name. But what if she can't make it back in time? The operations manager sniffled. Feng Yi didn't shift his gaze. She has to appear on the list at the very least. All right. The operations manager knew how much pressure the team would face if she reported her name. The netizens wouldn't let up on Spade Z's cross-dressing scandal. If they lost, Supreme Alliance would be doomed. But what could they do? Who hadn't been young and capricious before? The phone in the club was about to explode with calls. Many people suspected that it was Feng Yi's method since he was good at creating hype. But later on, people realized it wasn't anyone's doing. Those reposts, those comments, those voices on the official platform. If you had the heart, please take a look. What kind of expectations did a true fan have? If you really liked him, don't do anything he didn't like. If you really liked someone, stay closer to his competition and away from his private life. If you really liked this team, you just hoped to take one more look at them, to be able to stay together, even if it was just one more competition. They knew that in less than a year, these people would gradually retire. Perhaps many years later, they would become people they didn't even know. For work, for business, for socializing, they were always in a hurry. But even if one day, they could still remember their current feelings, that would be enough. Many people had forgotten something. Esports wasn't the entertainment industry. They might have looked at the face and appearance. But there was a group of people who truly loved it, that was how cohesive they were. In the end, the producer of the video was found out. He was a fan. That's right, a fan. It was a real person, one of the 4 people in the video. The twisted girls on the internet would probably never understand how much courage Supreme Alliance could bring to some people. And this courage was best described from a man's perspective. Chapter 1272. Have you ever felt that way? His throat tightened, not because he was upset but because he was touched. Whether it was an ordinary person or a member of the esports arena, they all had the same reaction when they saw the video. Lin Feng wore a sweater, standing in front of a store, watching the video on the screen, a cup of coffee in his hand. If little Spade knew there were so many people waiting for her, I wonder if she would come back. Yun Hu stood behind him, both hands in the pockets of his trench coat, glancing over. Lin Feng frowned, muttering, I wonder where that fellow went, I can't contact him at all. Compared to Lin Feng, Yun Hu had always thought deeper. In his heart, the youngster wasn't simple. Since he couldn't contact him, there must be something else. It's 5, if we don't leave now, there will be many people in the supermarket. That was right. The 2 of them came out to shop. Lin Feng didn't know who was his mother's biological son. Ever since Yun Hu came back, he had been fed with all sorts of soup and water. She had even said that they were going to compete and that he had to nourish himself. It had been 3 consecutive days. Every day, she would send Lin Feng out to buy bones to make soup. As an esports almighty, he had become a professional at fighting for bones with the aunties in the supermarket. Today, his mother wasn't too much, saying that Yun Hu would drive over and they could buy a new pot together. At the start, Lin Feng had been rather happy, but after coming out, it wasn't the same. He felt that it was a little awkward for the 2 of them to shop together. Moreover, they bought fruits and vegetables, an area that men rarely came to. Yun Hu was calm, pushing a shopping cart, his long legs walking in front. He wore a beige double-breasted trench coat, making him look gentler than usual. Lin Feng was afraid someone would recognize them and take photos of them together, hence, he wore a pure black mask. The mask was huge, but it didn't have the effect of keeping a low profile. Both of their figures and aura were there, even without their faces, they looked like they were in middle school. Walking in the fruits and vegetables area was indeed a little eye-catching. How could someone so handsome come to such an area? There were already a few girls who couldn't help looking over. Lin Feng still had the burden of being an idol, he rushed Yun Hu as he walked. Hurry up. All right. Yun Hu agreed, but his movements were still slow. He walked to Lin Feng's side and turned his body slightly. Do you want potatoes? Lin Feng nodded his head, his eyes darting back and forth. Who cares what it is? Leaving as soon as possible after buying it is the right thing to do. Yun Hu glanced at him before glancing at the girls not far away. He turned his head and casually placed the packaged potatoes on Lin Feng's face. Weigh them. Ah. Oh, weigh me, weigh me. Lin Feng had never felt so guilty before. The topic of 2 people shopping in the supermarket was really sensitive. Yun Hu watched his actions, his gaze deepening. When he returned, he lowered his head and asked, Do you want some oranges? Lin Feng also realized that this kind of whispering was too intimate. His face was a little uncomfortable from the other person's breath. He moved his body to the left and said, You can buy whatever you want. Then take a few. Yunhu acted as though he didn't see him dodge, remaining calm. Even Lin Feng found it strange. After all, in his impression, Yunhu didn't seem like someone who would shop in a supermarket. Chapter 1273. Yunhu was indeed different now. If it was in the past, he would still be worried about whether he should turn Lin Feng gay. Ever since he had left and this guy had cried, he didn't have to worry anymore. Instead of thinking about whether to turn him gay, it was better to think about how to turn him gay. Yunhu glanced sideways, glancing at the masked man beside him. Since they had already come this far, he couldn't retreat to the position of a good brother. He might as well take the initiative. Lin Feng didn't know what Yunhu was thinking. He glanced at the things in the cart. We're almost done. Shall we go? Let's go to the snacks area. Yunhu was pushing the shopping cart. Their movements were completely under his control. Lin Feng glanced at the girls again. Didn't you never eat snacks? My taste has changed recently, Yunhu replied casually. This is your favorite brand of chips, right? What flavor is good? When Lin Feng turned his head again, he saw Yunhu holding the snacks he usually ate. Barbecue flavor. Since he had already taken it, he might as well take a few more bags. Lin Feng thought about it and reached out his hand. Just then, he heard the sound of a phone photo. It was the two girls from before. Lin Feng's movements froze mainly because of his posture. Yunhu stood motionless in front of the snacks rack. Lin Feng reached out his hand to support his back. He looked as though he was about to push him against the wall. This was a huge misunderstanding. Lin Feng turned, wanting to chase after them and get the girl to delete the photo. Yunhu grabbed his wrist, his voice calm. You want everyone here to know that you are Lin Feng. They probably just took a photo casually. They don't know who you and I are. When Lin Feng heard this, he glanced over again. The two girls didn't ask for their autographs and didn't continue taking photos. They seemed to have taken the photo because they saw the two of them shopping in the supermarket. The girls also realized that their actions just now were probably not very polite. When they saw the handsome man wearing a mask looking at them, they were startled. They decided to walk over and admit their mistake. I'm sorry, I took a photo because you are so lovey-dovey. The girl took out her phone. I'll delete it now. Lin Feng was speechless. Too loving, too loving. Yunhu pushed the cart with one hand and held on to a certain someone with the other. His thin lips curved upwards. It's okay. As expected, I didn't guess wrong. It's rare to see two boys shopping and cooking together in the supermarket. As expected, only a couple would do that. The girl smiled happily. Lin Feng. He actually couldn't refute that. Yunhu didn't know what else he said. The two girls glanced at Lin Feng. Seeing that he was wearing a mask, they had no intention of saying anything. They giggled and said, how awkward. Lin Feng wanted to take off his mask again. Him. Yunhu seemed to have seen through his thoughts and lowered his voice. Be careful of fans. Lin Feng's throat kept repeating the word F***ck until the man left. Actually, he knew that he couldn't blame the two girls. The Empress Dowager was the real culprit. Why didn't she consider that two boys would be awkward when shopping in the supermarket? And why do you buy so many things? Yunhu didn't have any intention of leaving. Chapter 1274. How about trying this noodles? Yunhu asked casually. Lin Feng was confused. This person pulled down his mask just to let him try the noodles in the supermarket. What if someone saw through him? Moreover, the supermarket staff standing at the side had a suggestive smile on their faces. That was true. They probably hadn't seen two men being so intimate before. Lin Feng swallowed the noodles hurriedly, replying casually, "It's delicious. Buy a few bags then. It can be a midnight snack at the club." Yunhu's actions were natural. There was nothing wrong with it. Lin Feng's face was still hot. The warmth made him want to leave quickly. "Let's go once you're done." If they stayed any longer, they would probably become a couple in the eyes of others. Who had a boyfriend? Even though his phone hadn't been ringing for the past 2 days. It was probably because the training mission was too heavy and he didn't have time to contact him. But if the two of them were really recognized and someone exaggerated something, maybe Hu Zi's boyfriend would misunderstand. Lin Feng thought about it and felt that it wasn't appropriate to stay any longer. But Yunhu didn't think so. It wasn't easy for them to be alone. Of course, the longer the better. But he also understood that he couldn't force him too close. "You still haven't bought the ice cream. Didn't you say you wanted ice cream just now?" Yunhu's words were reasonable. Lin Feng thought about it. It would be awkward if he overreacted. It wasn't a big deal to leave after taking the ice cream. But when he opened the freezer and picked an ice cream, the man bent down and picked an ice cream across him. "Is this a new product from China?" Lin Feng replied, his mind drifting. He tried his best to avoid contact. He was a man. Why was he so repressed recently? "What flavors do you have?" Yunhu asked. Lin Feng tried to make himself look more manly. "Strawberry and peach." "Oh, that should be good." Yunhu fiddled with it a few more times. He took the peach ice cream and placed it in the cart. When he lowered his gaze, he could see the pink on his fair neck. It was really attractive. Yunhu's hand paused subconsciously, his gaze deepening. On the other side, the naive Lin Feng felt that his brother was deliberately stalling for time. But after thinking about it carefully, there was no need to stall for time just to pick an ice cream. After denying his thoughts, he watched as Yunhu went to the other fridge to get the yogurt. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He leaned over and took all the ice cream he liked and placed them all in the cart. "Are you done?" Yunhu walked back and glanced at Lin Feng. As expected, he couldn't be too strict with this guy. Lin Feng nodded. "I'll queue up." "All right." Finally, he could leave. In the future, he would come to the supermarket by himself. Lin Feng thought about it and decided to find a place near the cashier to wait for Yunhu to settle the bill. Unfortunately, he was standing in the most awkward position. People who frequented supermarkets all knew the layout of supermarkets. Condoms were usually placed near the cashier, and they were arranged very beautifully. They were packaged in various colors, and they even looked like candies and chocolates. Chapter 1275. Lin Feng had originally planned to leave calmly. After all, there was nothing wrong with a condom if you ignored it. You could just brush past it like chewing gum. Who knew that he hadn't retracted his gaze? There was an additional arm on his shoulder. It was Yunhu who had wanted to pay the bill. It was normal for boys to hook their shoulders. "I didn't bring my wallet." That was Yunhu's first sentence. His second sentence was accompanied by his gaze. Lin Feng knew that he was going to embarrass himself this time. "So you were looking at this?" Lin Feng wanted to say that it was a coincidence. But before he could speak, Yunhu's voice came from beside his ear. Yunhu's voice entered his ears again, his breath just enough to sweep past his ears. "Have you decided which brand to buy?" What brand? He didn't have any experience. How would he know about brands? Yunhu arched a brow. Condom brand, which one do you like? Lin Feng coughed. He couldn't let Yunhu think that he was a newbie. This was the biggest taboo for a man. He had to maintain his image. He said nonchalantly, the brand doesn't matter. The main point is the quality. After all, I have a long time. When he said this, Yunhu glanced in his direction, his gaze deep. Lin Feng was a little annoyed. What's with that look? Nothing. Yunhu smiled, glancing sideways. This is the first time I know that you have a long time. Lin Feng looked at the face that was inches away from him. His face flushed when he said, go to hell. This was the disadvantage of being a good brother. He knew everything. By this, Yunhu pulled the topic back naturally. If the brand is good, there are many flavors to choose from. Don't you like strawberry? I have it here. As Yunhu spoke, his hand reached out. His fingertips touched the exquisite packaging. He casually threw 3 bags into the car. Wait a minute, when did he say that he wanted to buy this thing? And why did he take so many? Lin Feng's eyes widened. But Yunhu's tone was very deliberative. He couldn't say anything. After all, he was the one who stood here first. However, Lin Feng felt that something was strange. When he raised his head, he saw a few girls sneaking glances in their direction. They covered their mouths with a suggestive look on their faces. There was obvious excitement on their faces, and he could vaguely hear them saying, not only are you buying groceries together, but you're also buying condoms together. Are you guys living together? Did you guys hear that? The attacker said that the submissive likes strawberry flavor. Strawberry, strawberry. What a tsundere. Lin Feng, he finally knew what was wrong. Why did he have to stand here with Hu Zi for such a long time, even discussing the taste of this thing? Not to mention these girls, even if he saw 2 men buying condoms together, he would also think in that direction. He really couldn't explain himself even if he jumped into the Yellow River. But since he had already taken it, he couldn't just put it back. Forget it, quickly pay the bill. Pay the bill and leave quickly. Fortunately, both of them were wearing masks. Otherwise, if it was posted on the internet, it might attract a storm of blood. After knowing that Yunhu didn't bring his wallet, Lin Feng went to queue up. When he was paying the bill, he watched as the cashier swept a glance at the item. Lin Feng's gaze was clearly wavering. Chapter 1276. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't seem like he had any experience. Yunhu could still remember how he felt when this person went on a date with the girl who had given him the love letter and didn't return until the next day. At that time, he didn't have a driver's license and couldn't drive the family car. He had asked the driver to bring him everywhere to look for this person. In the end, he hadn't found him. That day had become the day he regretted the most. No one could understand how his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. At that time, he hadn't understood why he had been so flustered and uncomfortable. He had kept his eyes open until the next day. He picked up his bag and went to school. When he saw that person chatting happily in class, someone asked him what he had done with the class bell next door. He grabbed a book and threw it over, scolding jokingly, "Don't ask, I have a temper too." Only he could see that person's face was a little red when he said this. That day, he hadn't spoken to him. He had been afraid that he would explode the moment he spoke. Yet, he had said in front of him that girls were different from boys. They were like cotton, very soft. That was one of the few times he had a cold war with him. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear him describe that night. For a whole month, he hadn't spoken to him. At the same time, he understood what jealousy was. Because he was so jealous, he had subconsciously looked at that girl. Until that girl had asked if she wanted to do her homework at the coffee shop with a red face. Yun-Hu had agreed with a faint smile. Yes, he wanted to let him know that some people weren't worthy of his constant attention. Very quickly, he had been punched by him. It was so heavy that even now, when he thought about it, he still asked himself what exactly he had wanted to do. Perhaps he had been too jealous that that girl could have him for a night. But he hadn't gotten anything, even though they had been so close. Looking at it now, according to a certain someone's personality, perhaps nothing had happened that day. After all, as a certain someone had said, he had been through hundreds of battles. So how could he explain his current expression? Yun-Hu glanced at Lin Feng's face, watching as he uncomfortably placed the 3 bags into the plastic bag. He was only wearing a thick black sweater, but he was more handsome than everyone else. He even gave off a carefree vibe. But Yun-Hu knew this person's state better than anyone else. He had no experience. Yun-Hu's lips curved into a smile when he thought about it. Lin Feng was still grumbling that he would never come to the supermarket together again. He was really unlucky. Being naive, he didn't notice that his words had been seen through. The car was on the ground. It was dark black and not eye-catching at all. But those who were familiar with cars knew that ordinary families couldn't afford to use a Cayenne as a means of transportation. Lin Feng was already used to it. After all, he knew how the Yun family was like. Yun-Hu tilted his head and spoke on WeChat. The person who sent the message was none other than Mother Lin. Yeah, Lin Feng and I finished shopping and we're just about to head back. I think there will be a little traffic jam at this time. After reporting the progress, Yun-Hu placed his phone at the side. After glancing at Lin Feng, he suddenly leaned forward. Lin Feng was still holding something in his hands. What are you doing? Fasten your seatbelt. Yun-Hu's attitude was natural. Lin Feng was extremely uncomfortable. He was too close. I'll fasten it myself. Yun-Hu didn't force him. After retracting his hand, he asked casually, who are you going to use those things with? Don't you have a girlfriend yet? Lin Feng choked and laughed dryly. Who said I don't have one? Why? Are you pretending to have one? Yun-Hu turned the steering wheel with one hand and smiled. When we just left, you told Auntie Lin to prepare for the competition seriously and not consider personal matters. Did you forget it so quickly? When Lin Feng heard this, he knew he couldn't fool him anymore. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He was really rascally. Can't I keep it for storage? Of course. Yun-Hu took the opportunity to light a cigarette while waiting for the red light. His gaze deepened. It's convenient. Convenient? What was convenient? Lin Feng was puzzled by what he heard. He felt that Yun-Hu was hinting at something. There's no need for me to buy it. Yun-Hu blew out a smoke ring. He seemed to be very close to him. Lin Feng completely misunderstood Yun-Hu. He thought about his boyfriend. If you need it, you can take it away now. Yun-Hu glanced at him. Do you want to use it now? No. Lin Feng flicked the cigarette ash. He hadn't expected to encounter such a situation and ask him for such things. Yun-Hu replied slowly, then I don't need it now. Lin Feng didn't know what to say. If something really happened between him and his boyfriend one day, it was best not to let him know. He felt a tightness in his chest. It should be better to smoke. That was what Lin Feng thought. Yun-Hu also realized that this person probably didn't understand what he meant. But it didn't matter. When the competition ended, he would have a good talk with him. There was indeed a traffic jam. When they reached home, Lin Feng returned to his usual young master manner and placed the plastic bag on the sofa. I'm exhausted. I told Empress Dowager, can you go shopping yourself in the future? I can't. Mother Lin was beautiful. Have you seen any beauty go shopping in the market? I just did my nails, what if I spoil them again? Look at Lin Hu and look at you, both of you are going shopping. Lin Feng. Really, he definitely wasn't related. Let me see what you bought. Mother Lin said as she flipped through the bags. Lin Feng leaped up instantly and pulled the bags towards the river. Mother Lin was confused. Son. Cough. Lin Feng cleared his throat. Yunhu said that his throat is sore. Go make some pear soup for him first, we'll look at the vegetables later. If he flipped through the bags, he would be dead. You little rascal, you are quite caring. Mother Lin nodded and went to make the pear soup happily. Lin Feng felt that it was a false alarm. He hurriedly took out the 3 bags and stuffed them into his trouser pocket before heaving a sigh of relief. Yunhu, who was sitting beside him, looked at him with a smile as though it was nothing and as though he was making a fuss out of nothing. That was true. He was inexperienced. Yunhu had a boyfriend, so he couldn't compare. Lin Feng felt that the things in his trouser pocket were getting more and more uncomfortable. He decided to find a place to throw them away. The moment he entered his room, someone followed behind him. The door was pushed open and he didn't stop his actions. Everything had probably been seen, so there was nothing to hide. Lin Feng stuffed his hands into his trouser pocket and met Yunhu's eyes. They seemed a little indifferent and deep. A ray of light flashed past as though he was hurt by something. Chapter 1277. Aw. Lin Feng grabbed his hair. I didn't think I could use it and it would be awkward if my mom saw it. I might as well throw it away. Yunhu's gaze landed on his face. Didn't I ask you to keep it? Lin Feng couldn't control himself. Can't you buy it when you want to use it with your boyfriend? Why do you want me to keep it for you? Yunhu looked at him, his voice slow. What boyfriend? Are you trying to provoke me? Lin Feng reached out and pulled the man's collar up. What boyfriend are you talking about? Don't tell me you're learning from those people on the internet, fooling around with anyone you meet. Yunhu arched a brow. With a flip of his hand, he pressed Lin Feng against the wall, his hand still holding onto Lin Feng's wrist. If I was just fooling around, would I have waited for you for so long? Lin Feng's face turned red at this baffling question. You can talk, but can you not be so close to me? F***ck. Lin Feng really didn't know what to say. Yunhu inched closer to the person's face and smiled slowly. Are you shy? F***cku. Lin Feng inhaled deeply. Let go of me first. Yunhu bent over. I'm not letting go. F***ck. Lin Feng was going crazy. Yunhu felt that it wasn't bad, especially when he saw the flush on his face. His heart ached, as though there was a cat scratching his heart. Just as he was about to talk about his so-called boyfriend, Lin Feng seemed to have found his savior. Lin Feng looked as if he had finally found his savior and used his hand to push him away. Get away, there's a call. There was indeed a call. From his position, Yunhu could feel his phone vibrating in his pocket. He had no choice but to let go of him. Lin Feng heaved a sigh of relief. The call came at the right time. He reached out to take the phone. When he saw the caller ID, he was completely different. He immediately pressed the answer button. F***ck. Little Spade. You have to tell me clearly where exactly are you. I'm telling you, don't find an excuse to hang up on me. Senior Lin, you're still as energetic as ever. I didn't intend to hang up. I called to tell you that Brother Mo and I are flying to Jiang City tomorrow and we need someone to cover us. Qin Mo nodded. Senior Lin, you're still as energetic as ever. I didn't intend to hang up. The captain is with you. Lin Feng's voice was filled with surprise. In the end, she decided not to tell him about the Almighty's amnesia since there were still people investigating. We'll talk when we meet. I have a car here that needs to be taken over. You can be my guarantor and we'll talk about the rest when we meet. Car. Sure. This was the advantage of being naive and sweet. She wouldn't ask too many questions. After Bojiu hung up, she lifted her head and met his gaze. That person had just finished washing up, and his whole body was still emitting a refreshing mint scent. He was leaning against the door frame and looking at her. He must have heard the contents of her phone call, because his peach blossom eyes were very deep. Bojiu stood up and walked over. I just made a call to our mutual friend. Oh. Qin Mo chuckled, but no one could tell what he was thinking. Chapter 1278. Bojiu wasn't wrong. Indeed, Qin Mo wasn't interested in anyone else other than his prey. Especially when he knew she still had friends. In his heart, his prey only had to look at him. How could there be a friend? Qin Mo smiled, but there wasn't a hint of warmth in his eyes. But at this moment, he wouldn't allow himself to show it. He hadn't forgotten his persona. He had to be gentle at all times. Shall we go downstairs? Qin Mo asked, reaching for his coat. Bojiu watched his tall and slender back view, unable to read his thoughts. But she understood that people who had lost their memories tended to distance themselves from others. But the Almighty was different. He seemed to believe everything that she said. They didn't bring any luggage. In such a lawless area, identification wasn't required and they could check in immediately. Hence, it was easy to leave the hotel. After a night's sleep, the Almighty seemed to have recovered completely. It didn't look like he had had a fever the night before. Bojiu was the same. It wasn't because of her healing abilities, but after thinking about it, the things the Almighty had done last night were enough to make a person sweat until their fever subsided. Boss, do you have petrol here? Bojiu decided to stock up on petrol for little Blackie before leaving. Unexpectedly, the boss's expression changed when he saw them, turning into a servant that answered every question. Petrol. I have a freshly filled car here. If you need it, I'll get it right away. As the owner spoke, when he passed by the Almighty, he revealed a flattering smile. Bojiu arched a brow. The boss hadn't been this way when they had checked in last night. Why was it so different this morning? Seeing the Almighty was like a mouse seeing a cat. No, it was even scarier than seeing a cat. Brother Mo, you came down yesterday. That was her first reaction. Qin Mo didn't deny it, a warm smile on his face. I informed the boss when I asked for the petrol. Bojiu was suspicious. Just a greeting. It seems like Sugar Daddy doesn't trust me. Qin Mo replied nonchalantly, I thought you would believe anything I say. Aren't you my lover? Bojiu couldn't stand the way the Almighty was talking to her. Even though his attitude was casual, she started to reflect on herself. Of course I trust you. Qin Mo lowered his gaze. Bojiu couldn't help but lean over and kiss him. I'll believe everything you say. Qin Mo chuckled. Boss's tone wasn't good yesterday, so I taught him some manners. Good teaching. When the boss who brought the gas heard the young man's words, he just wanted to send these two living bodhisattvas away as soon as possible. Do you have any idea how lethal this one of yours is? You're treating him like a porcelain doll. The boss dared to be angry but did not dare to say anything. After all, when the man glanced at him without any emotion, he could feel a chill all over his body. He didn't know if the youth was really stupid or just pretending to be stupid. Since she brought such a man with her. He knew this kind of person the best. He looked gentle and gentle, like the most loyal butler. In fact, if one wasn't careful and bit down on him, he would be like a demon deacon, sucking his blood dry with the most elegant dining posture. Chapter 1279. With that, the boss couldn't help but admire the youngster's calmness. After all, he had experienced how scary this man could be. But this man was impressive. He was able to turn into another person in front of the youngster. There wasn't the slightest bit of malevolence from last night. He was acting innocent. Chi Nemo was satisfied with the effect of his gaze. In front of his prey, he didn't want anyone else to speak. He didn't want to tear off this layer of disguise because the youngster's reaction was interesting. As long as he showed the slightest sign of weakness, she would hold him in her palms and use kisses to coax him. It was a refreshing feeling for Chi Nemo. Besides, his prey wasn't stupid. It wouldn't be interesting if she simply thought that he was good. From the youngster's reaction, it was obvious that he had already guessed what he had done. However, he had still praised him for teaching him well. Chi Nemo couldn't help but smile. Even when they were in the car, Chi Nemo was still smiling. The moment little Blackie turned on the AI system, the car shook from the force. What was wrong with the devil? Why was he smiling so sweetly? He seemed to have sensed the change in the Lamborghini. Chi Nemo turned over. This car isn't bad. Other than the land and water forms, what else is there? There isn't any form, but it can be used as a network hub. Bojo was in a good mood. It was a satisfying thing to have the Almighty stay by her side obediently. Xiao Hei, on the other hand, didn't feel so good about it. It felt that there was something fishy about the devil praising it. As an intelligent car, the information it had gathered told it that a devil like this would never praise anyone unless there was some ulterior motive. But its master. Sigh. Little Blackie didn't want to say anything else. Ever since the devil had appeared, its position as the #1 car pet hadn't returned. Chi Nemo did have a motive, but it wasn't a big one. To him, he was more interested in a prey that only had him in her eyes. Hence, he didn't say anything else. Bojo waited for a moment before turning the car. It was a beautiful maneuver, a smile on her face. Oh right, the password for this car is, Chi Nemo, I like you. Chi Nemo knew his name a long time ago. Now that he heard the youngster's words, his hand that was twirling the poker card paused. Sounds like Sugar Daddy's personality. I think so too. Bojo turned the steering wheel. If you like it, say it. Chi Nemo didn't say anything, but his smile deepened. He looked like a devil as he narrowed his eyes. Chi, what an idiot. Tell him everything. Aren't you worried that he'll drive away? With that in mind, Chi Nemo glanced sideways at the youngster's face. Light seeped in, forming a halo. His skin seemed to be transparent. White and clean, even the fine hair could be seen. He knew very well how this face felt to the touch. Not only her face, but also the curve of her waist when she turned sideways. It was hard not to like the warm jade in his hand. Chi Nemo thought, as long as his prey can stay like this, with a pair of eyes only looking at him, he wouldn't lose interest in her in the short term. Chapter 1280. But it didn't matter. There was such an interesting prey around. He could put aside the matter of killing for now. He could wait until he couldn't take it anymore. But no matter what, he had to wash his hands clean. In front of his prey, harmlessness was the most important condition. Chi Nemo tilted his head. With his trench coat on, he was extremely eye-catching. He was like a walking clothes rack. With that face, he probably wouldn't be able to enter without some changes. Fortunately, Bojio had prepared many identification cards. She found one that was about the Almighty's age and made some changes to his appearance to reduce the Almighty's presence. Bojio knew that the more confidential the mission, the more they wouldn't be investigated openly. As long as the information was completely clean and the identity matched, they could basically enter the country. That was why she had taken a detour and decided to fly back from Country T. Country T was a tourist city and had always been visa-free for Chinese. Bojio was smart. She didn't fly directly. Instead, when she reached MG Airport, she signed up for a tour group and returned to Jiang City as a member. It was originally a low-quality tour. The few girls that followed her didn't feel anything other than shopping. When they reached the airport, two different types of handsome guys appeared in front of them. They were all in a good mood. "Look over there. Handsome men, since when did our team have these two weirdos? They must have just arrived, we might be able to sit together later." Bojio's arrival made the tour group livelier. Some of them looked over. The girls were still trying to guess the relationship between the two, wondering if they could each have one. The corners of Chin Mo's mouth lifted, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't interested in the others. He just stood beside Bojio, looking harmless on the surface. He had an attractive aura. Bojio wanted to send the car back. Hence, she didn't bother about them and went to the first floor to submit the documents. Grandfather Butler was usually in charge of the overseas car entry and exit. Many people thought that Grandfather Butler was just an ordinary family doctor. In reality, that wasn't the case. It was a family of hackers. The butler of the family wasn't simple either. The old butler had a lot of channels in his hands, and every single one of them was hard to measure in terms of value. Of course, at the end of the day, it was also because of the Z code name. No one dared to offend this young master of hackers. Those who could make things convenient would usually do so. After all, anyone in the underworld would need information one day. Chi Nemo watched the whole process, his eyes unsettled. After all, to him, the more complicated the identity of the prey, the more useful it would be. "Brother Emo, do you want some water?" Bojio was thirsty after she was done with her business. Chi Nemo watched as she licked her lips, his eyes deepening. "I'm indeed a little thirsty. I'll go buy it." She reached into her pocket and walked towards the vending machine. Her movements were casual, probably because of her long legs, which made her look dashing. The girl who was also waiting for the plane overheard their conversation and wanted to strike up a conversation. "Handsome, I have an unopened bottle of water here. If you're thirsty, you can drink it first." Chi Nemo glanced sideways, glancing at the mineral water that the girl handed over. He was about to turn her into his believer. Chapter 1281. It was easy to hint at someone. As long as he knew what the other party was thinking, it would be easy. But Chi Nemo didn't want to take the bottle of water. Compared to his prey, these people looked too dirty. Had his appetite been spoiled? Chi Nemo arched a brow. Just as he was about to stop, someone appeared on his shoulder. The youngster's pleasant scent wafted over. There was a smile on her face as she whispered into his left ear, "I'm sorry, my boyfriend isn't used to drinking other people's food." Chi Nemo didn't need to turn to know who was speaking. Except for the prey he was interested in. His current sugar daddy was an exception. No one would say such a thing. Chi Nemo tilted his head and saw a beautiful side profile. She pouted her lips in his direction. She seemed to be saying, "You caused trouble." Was she jealous? Chin Mo was curious. He reached out and pinched her chin, planting a kiss on it. She had just drunk the water and her mouth was filled with sweetness. Did you secretly eat sweets? Chin Mo asked casually. He didn't seem to have any intention of pushing the youngster off him. Instead, he smiled devilishly. My sugar daddy is really mischievous. Bojo was caught off guard by the kiss. Moreover, the two girls could hear the Almighty calling her, so she couldn't be bothered to move. She had to be direct when it came to declaring her ownership. The girl who was flirting with him was confident in her looks, which was why she acted so boldly. She hadn't expected it to be so awkward. When she had heard their conversation, she had thought they were really brothers. She hadn't thought of anything else. But now that she looked at them, they were here on vacation. If it wasn't that kind of relationship, what else could it be? The girl blushed as she took the bottle back. Bojo smiled at her. In an instant, the girl blushed again. Compared to the unapproachable man, the youngster seemed more considerate. Chin Mo noticed the commotion. His gaze deepened. When he looked at the girl again, the color in his eyes had changed. It was as dark as the night, endless. The girl shuddered. She felt as though he was going to kill her. The corners of his mouth were clearly hooked into a smile. Why did he give off such a feeling? Chin Mo didn't look at anyone. Instead, he hugged the youngster and placed her between his legs. They were both waiting for a flight, but no one sat like that. She didn't sit directly in his arms. Instead, Chin Mo sat on the chair while Bojo sat like a huge doll. She stacked on top of him and sat in the same position. However, she exerted force on the front half of the chair. It was also because the Almighty's legs were too long that most people would be able to sit like that. The people at the side widened their eyes. This was overseas and they were still so open. How could they be like this in China? Bojo also felt that they were attracting too much attention. However, the Almighty didn't change his position at all. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. He closed his eyes, his eyelashes long like fans. I'm tired. Those 3 words successfully stopped Bojo from moving. She turned to caress the Almighty's head, his black hair slipping past her fingertips. He was just like a little princess when he was young. Bojo smiled, her heart softening. She coaxed, we're going to board the plane soon. Bear with it a little longer, MMH. All right. Chin Mo didn't loosen his grip. His handsome face was mostly buried in her shoulder, leaving only his side profile that made people want to turn back to look at him. It was indeed breathtaking. The girl at the side had never seen such a person before. When he looked at her, his malevolent aura would send chills down anyone's spine. But the next second, when he faced the youngster, his fake gentleness seemed to be able to melt everything. However, the youngster was coaxing the devilish man like a child. The girl felt her heart racing. She didn't dare to say anything else and pulled her friend away. The other onlookers, on the other hand, were all curious. After all, it was rare for a grown man to be coaxed. Chin Mo didn't care about this at all. As long as his prey was within his control, everything was fine. But he realized that he wasn't completely in control. He didn't know what it would be like when they arrived at a place she was familiar with. Including the phone call she had made previously. Their mutual friend. Chin Mo arched a brow, his gaze deep. Soon, the plane started to arrange for check-in. Since it was a tour group, not many people checked. There weren't any sudden incidents on the plane. But there was one point that no one noticed. There was a gaze hidden in the crowd, filled with darkness and indignation. It was Fan Jia. After she had escaped, she had thought of many ways to get a new identity. Finally, she had settled everything. When she went to look for him, there was no news at all. When she saw the video online, she suddenly remembered that he would definitely return to Jiang City. Because in his subconscious mind, he wanted to return to a place he was familiar with, to crush all those who deserved to die. This was the real Qin Mo. Fan Jia watched as they left, a smile forming on her face. Psychological hints wouldn't go wrong. Now that he was staying by the youngster's side, he probably didn't have any sincerity. The biggest possibility was that he treated him as prey. Her teacher had once said, as psychologists, they were the best at disguising, especially when they had ulterior motives. Now, she just needed to return to Jiang City, find a way to get in touch with Qin Mo and guide him a little. Then he would truly belong to her. Because memories would change along with psychology. Fan Jia didn't feel that there was anything wrong with taking over a position that didn't belong to her. She turned and hit herself again. Now, her image was everywhere. Fan Jia didn't dare to show her face, purposely making a scar on her face to buy a late-night flight. At this moment, the plane had been flying for more than 2 hours. Bojiu and Qin Mo sat side by side. They had booked the entire first-class cabin. Firstly, they didn't want anyone to spy on them. Secondly, before boarding the plane, Qin Mo had said that he was tired. As a domineering CEO, if he didn't show off his wealth now, when would he? Moreover, Bojiu's money was going to rot if she didn't spend it. She decisively became a tycoon. In the end, the person who had said that he was tired wasn't sleeping. His long legs were slightly crossed as he read a newspaper. His entire body was filled with an aura of abstinence. But at this moment, there was a hint of darkness mixed in. On the other hand, Bojiu tilted her head to the side, her hair falling down, revealing her true color. Silver gray. It seemed like his sugar daddy was hiding something from him. Qin Mo arched a brow, his right hand moving slightly, allowing her to lean against him. After all, he liked her body temperature, it was warm but not scalding. The stewardess, who was pushing the dining cart over, saw this scene as soon as she arrived. After lowering her voice, she asked gently, "Sir, what would you like to drink?" "It's fine, just a blanket, thank you." When Qin Mo said this, there wasn't any warmth in his eyes. It was probably because of the youngster's frown. "Okay," the stewardess replied. When she turned back, she saw him patting the person in his arms with one hand. His voice was low and slow, it was extremely melodious, as though it could easily hypnotize a craftsman. The stewardess listened in a daze, shaking her head. She had almost forgotten what she was going to do. Qin Mo looked at Bojiu, reaching out to pinch her face, lowering his body. "You better not look at anyone else, my sugar daddy's little prey." Bojiu didn't have a light sleep, probably because the clothes in her hands and the surging scent in her nose were too familiar, making her feel comfortable. Just as she was about to hit the ground, she woke up and saw his left hand playing with the poker cards. His other hand was placed on her head, stroking her hair. After seeing her open her eyes, he smiled and planted a kiss on her forehead, but vaguely, there was an indescribable danger. "This is Jiang City." Bojiu followed his gaze, taking his hand over and placing it in her own. She played with it for a while before saying, "Mate, this is Jiang City, don't you like it?" "I don't dislike it." Qin Mo felt the warmth in his fingers, the light in his eyes dissipating a little. "I just can't remember how I used to live here in the past." Bojiu laughed. "You are very famous here, many people like you, you have a group of brothers who are loyal to you, but you still like me the most." Qin Mo arched a brow. From a certain perspective, the prey he had his eyes on seemed to be very thick-skinned. Oh. What else? What else? Bojiu thought for a moment. "You have a crush on me but are too embarrassed to admit it, so you gave me a lot of books for me to comprehend on my own. What are the books I gave you? Chin Mo asked casually. Bojo straightened her body suavely. Overbearing CEO falls in love with me, where are my sweetheart? There are also some books I can't remember. Chin Mo tapped the corner of her lips with his finger. What? Bojo arched a brow. Chin Mo leaned over, kissing her lips lightly. His breath followed. Water stain, you didn't drink obediently when I fed you water. But I'm curious, what did you comprehend from the books? Of course it's your first awakening of love. Bojo wrapped her arms around his neck. When she smiled, the mole at the corner of her eyes glistened. Chin Mo's lower abdomen tightened, his gaze deepening. His fingers slid into her sweater through the blanket. When he smiled, he didn't know why, but his body temperature rose as well. Bojo could feel his strength clearly. She suddenly trembled, tears welling up in her eyes. Chin Mo lowered his voice, low and sexy, right beside her ear. His breath hit her, making her arch her back. Chapter 1282. How to make your body feel happy. Bojo realized that her earlobe was being bitten lightly. That sexy voice and hot breath hit her ear, sending a numbing sensation through her. Bojo knew that the Almighty wouldn't do anything to her since they were about to alight. But the subtle teasing was unbearable, her eyes turning red. He seemed to like seeing her like this, chuckling softly beside her ear. It seems to be effective. He wanted to play with it in his palm. Just like a little toy. But for some reason, when he heard the breath in his arms going wild, he actually had a reaction. This made him release his hand. But she was smiling, the corners of her lips lifting as she kissed him, like a siren in the water. It is indeed effective. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. If the broadcast hadn't interrupted his thoughts at the right time, perhaps he would reveal all of his true nature. For instance, he might have abducted her. Such a beautiful prey should be held in his arms and raised in a pampered manner. As for other things, be it a kiss or something deeper than a kiss, he should be the one to teach her. Perhaps he could plan it well. After all, he liked the way she smiled at him, the way her eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of moonlight. But similarly, he didn't like that kind of warmth. Because Chin Mo knew that this person was looking at the past him. With that thought, a thin layer of coldness swept over the surging emotions in his eyes. Chin Mo laughed lightly. It would be better if we weren't on the plane. With that, his gaze landed on her neck. Then he lowered his lids, planting a kiss on it, followed by a light bite. Bojo wasn't able to reach for the vibrating phone in her pocket. She was even kneading it into a puddle. Bojo suspected that the Almighty was doing it on purpose since every time she picked up the call, he seemed a little unhappy. Even though he was smiling, no matter how she looked at him, he looked like a rich young master. But his actions were in line with the gentleness he purposely created. Come to think of it, he had been like this when they were young. Every time she went to play with other children, he would always stand by the side and smile like a prince, but it was different when he was with her. His little face was cold as he washed her hands, and he would even bite her fingers without saying why. The Almighty's personality was just that weird. Bojo was used to it. She held onto his shoulders tightly. She couldn't tell if it was ticklish or painful. She frowned slightly, her voice trembling. Gentler. When Chin Mo heard that voice, his eyes moved slightly. His gaze deepened, and even the imprint in his eyes reddened. Let me answer the phone. Bojo's breathing was unstable, the strands of sweat sticking to her flushed cheeks. Even if I don't pick up the call, we have to alight. Chin Mo was done. He pushed her hair away from her face and smiled gently. Of course I have to get off the plane. What else does my sugar daddy think I'm going to do? Bojo remained silent, waiting for the heat to dissipate. But the feeling of touch in some places had not faded. Chapter 1283. Chin Mo's lips brushed past Bojo's ears. Even though he didn't kiss her, it was more intimate. He looked into her eyes, chuckling lightly, his voice mesmerizing and deep. Just a single sentence from him was enough to make one's body heat up. Fortunately, they knew how to restrain themselves. Bojo pushed him away, reaching for her phone. She could hear the stewardess's high heels. The next second, the curtains were pulled open. Distinguished guests, our plane has landed safely. Please take your belongings with you when you get off the plane. Have a pleasant journey next time. This was probably the benefit of spending a lot of money. Even on the plane, there was a private space. Bojo caressed her neck, smiling suavely. Thank you. The stewardess was dazzled by her smile, nodding. Bojo placed the phone by her ear, lowering her voice as she said, "Hello." She and the Almighty didn't have any luggage. Bojo took a step before realizing that the Almighty wasn't following her. She turned back and saw Chin Mo's gaze sweeping towards the stewardess. His lips moved slightly, but she didn't know what he was saying. The stewardess's pupils constricted. She seemed to have been hypnotized, her body arching. Bojo couldn't see this because of her position. The stewardess was standing with her back facing her. But even so, the Almighty's smile made her hand pause for a moment. She wasn't a naive girl, she knew what that smile meant. But what should she do? That was her Chin Mo. Regardless of what he turned into, he would always be her little princess. Bojo reached out, tugging his wrist over. She tilted her body slightly, blocking his gaze towards the stewardess. She smiled faintly. Brother Mo, I'll get jealous if you flirt with someone like that. Chin Mo hadn't expected her to turn back so suddenly. After his wrist was touched, he couldn't be bothered with the hypnosis he had completed. After all, he couldn't let his prey notice anything wrong with him. He shifted his gaze away casually and said faintly, I get jealous when you smile at someone like that. Bojo stilled as she was being countered. That was the time difference. The air stewardess seemed to have woken up. She saw the young man holding the man's wrist. At such a close distance, it looked intimate. Bojo coughed lightly, dragging the Almighty away since the stewardess was still in shock. However, it was just a guess. She also vaguely understood one thing. It would be difficult for the Almighty to stand in the esports arena again. Previously, she had been thinking of bringing the Almighty back as soon as possible. However, he had neglected one point. Right now, would he still coordinate with everyone in the team and fight a match? All of this was unknown. It was better to think of a way to stop him from thinking of manipulating others. Handsome, harmless, and able to lead people's thoughts unknowingly. Such a dangerous Almighty. He had to keep it by his side. Bojo glanced over. Brother Mo, it seems like I have to watch you 24/7. Just like you used to look at me looking at you. At that time, she had always thought that he did not believe her. When the two of them exchanged places, Bojo finally understood. He looked at her as if he didn't want anything bad to happen to her. Right now, she was feeling the same way. She was afraid that one day, he would regain his memory and regret what he had done. Chapter 1284. Watch me 24 hours a day. Are you sure? Chin Mo didn't understand Bojo's thoughts, but he chuckled. It was light, but his gaze was as deep as the stars. I will torment you at night, but that's good too. You can put some of the things you learned into practice. When he said this, his breath was right behind her ear. It was slightly hot and slow, as though it was intentional. Bojo's uneasiness dissipated. She held on to his hand and continued walking. No matter what, it was good that he was here. Moreover, he allowed her to hold on to his hand so obediently. From a certain perspective, she felt that she was taking advantage of him. After all, he had allowed her to hold on to his hand when they were young. In the past, he would only tilt his head and glance at her. Now, it was good. She held on to his hand and he would follow her. Regardless of the reason, the blissful feeling was still the same. Indeed, Chin Mo wouldn't struggle free. He probably found it strange too. Or perhaps, he was indulging his beloved prey. Hence, he allowed himself to temporarily become an obedient pet boy. After all, he claimed to be a sugar daddy. A hint of playfulness flashed past Chin Mo's eyes. He had never seen such a pure sugar daddy. It tasted sweet in his mouth. He was indeed interested in those books. Today, he could study them properly. Bojo didn't know what he was thinking, but she knew that even if he changed his appearance, the Almighty's aura wouldn't change. She took out 2 black masks. After walking out of the tunnel, she gestured for him to lower his head. Chin Mo glanced at the things in her hands. He arched a brow. It seems like I can't be seen in Jiang City. It's not that you can't be seen. You are too popular and have too many fans. Bojo seemed to understand the Almighty's temper. She added, I don't want others to see you since you are mine. It was obvious that this sentence had an effect. She could see the faint smile on his lips under the bright light. Chin Mo didn't move. Instead, he lowered his body. His intention was clear. Bojo didn't need to lift her feet. She just needed to move her fingers, grazing his ear. The black mask unfurled, covering his handsome mixed-race face. How is it? Chin Mo asked casually. Bojo wore her mask as well. Through the black cloth, she smiled. Very handsome. She was even more arrogant than before. He had to be praised. So what if such a great god was dangerous? In fact, to a certain extent. In this way, he had just released everything, including some of his childhood habits. Bojo knew how dangerous the Almighty was when he wasn't even able to suppress his malevolence. He wouldn't be a rat like Fan Jia who only knew how to play tricks in the corner, nor would he be a criminal who created grievances like Kawang. He would do whatever he wanted, unrestrained by worldly rules. If he wanted to make a move, he would make a move, just like on the plane. He was more cunning than any psychopath. Like a demon, he could kill gracefully. This was the reason why people were afraid that his personality would change drastically after being hypnotized. Bojo understood everything. That was why she had to hold on to him and not let go. Not for the sake of protecting anyone. She was clear that she was the only one by his side. It was probably because this person was too strong. He was so strong that the first thing everyone thought about after he lost his memory was how dangerous he was. But no one had thought about his uneasiness and guesses. Who was he? Why did he appear in this place? Who should he trust? What was he thinking when he was facing so many speedboats and guns? The moment she thought about it, her heart softened. When she turned back, she saw his arrogant and aloof expression. It was clear that he was a little childish. How could he be so adorable? I want to make you small again. MH. Chin Mo thought he had heard wrongly, but after leaning forward, he confirmed that she had indeed made a sound, even though it was soft. Bojo continued, then I can hug you in my arms and not let anyone bully you. Bully him. Chin Mo arched a brow. The youngster's stern and serious expression entered his eyes. It was that gaze that stopped him from executing his plan. In this world, who could bully him? He was really an idiot. But why didn't he want to leave? The only explanation Chin Mo could find was that his interest in her hadn't diminished. That was all. The two of them walked out of the terminal. They didn't have to wait for any luggage, so they were faster than the others. But the way they held hands without any taboo caused many people to turn back. The two of them were good-looking to begin with. Wearing masks to share the burden did not detract from this aspect. Instead, it added a sense of fashion. A girl exclaimed, "This is the most compatible couple I've ever seen. The airport is indeed the airport. I can see two handsome guys at once and they are a couple." Chin Mo lifted the corner of his lips as he listened to the conversation. A couple. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it before. Of course, he wouldn't waste his time on such things. Because he still had to face the mutual friend that she had mentioned. Outside the airport, a long Rolls-Royce was parked in the middle of a row of cars. It was a low-profile black, but even so, it was enough to make a group of people stop. After all, there weren't many such cars in the country. Which family's young master was back? Everyone was guessing if he was a rich and powerful person in Jiang City. But no matter how hard they searched, they couldn't remember who was driving this car. Moreover, the person standing in front of the car was unfamiliar. He looked to be in his 60s, a Chinese-British old man with a tall and slender figure. There weren't many people who could wear such a classic suit, but this person did it. He held a pocket watch in his hand and glanced at it from time to time. He looked like a noble deacon that only appeared in comics, his entire body exuding wisdom. Was there a big production team filming a movie here? Or was it because Christmas was coming and they were filming a promotional video? After all, it wasn't realistic. But the next second, the old man smiled. He looked at the international exit kindly, his gaze landing on one spot. Then he opened the back door in a gentlemanly manner and gestured for them to enter. At this moment, everyone noticed the two people walking out. They were both wearing masks but had an extraordinary aura. They wanted to take a few photos. When Bojo saw this scene, her heart was in turmoil. After all, she hadn't expected Grandfather Butler to drive such a car. It was fine on Fifth Avenue. But this was China, it was too eye-catching. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.